I'm saying hello and welcome back to our webcast joiners. And that's great. Thank you. Okay, so next up, ecological monitoring through thermal imaging. Jonas, I'm gonna start that again. Jonas Hamberg, University of Waterloo. Jonas Hamberg is a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo and a part of the Conservation and Restoration Ecology, that's the CARE Lab, originally from Sweden. Jonas studied and worked in India, Brazil, South Africa, and the United States before coming to Canada. He has an MA from Uppsala University in Sweden and an MSc in Environmental Science from SUNY ESF in Syracuse, New York. His PhD at Waterloo focuses on the thermodynamics of restoring ecosystems. His research sites are in Simcoe and Norfolk counties. So please join me in a warm welcome for Jonas.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me in the back? Am I close enough? Yes, I got some thumbs up. I have three things in common with the very now famous climate activist Greta Thunberg. I'm also Swedish. My name also ends with a soft G, so it's Thunberg and Hamberg. Sorry, that's throwing shade now. I had prepped that before, and now it just feels like I'm just throwing shade. And I also care a lot about the climate. So today I'm going to be talking to you about how to take the temperature of ecosystem restoration. So this is the International Space Station. And right here it's called EcoStress. It's a thermal camera. It was launched last year and attached, and I may be Swedish, but I've been here for 5 years, and I have some Canadian pride, and that's actually the Canadian robot arm attaching it, so that was pretty cool. So let's see if it works now. Oh, it works. Okay. So just as a quick overview, I'm going to be talking about temperature and energy in ecosystems. How to use thermal imaging through satellites and UAVs, the effect of restoration on temperature, the effect of biodiversity on temperature, and temperature trends in Toronto ravines because, well, I'm here. Okay, you are here. So at the end of that arrow is the Toronto Botanical Gardens. That's where you parked if you took your car. And down here is where you walked if you took a ravine walk just now. And I went on one of these walks, and after about 10 minutes, I was like, oh, wow, this is really nice and cool. I need to run back to my computer and see, what it looks like thermally. So you are also here. This is from an image from July. We don't have live thermal imagery, unfortunately, not yet. But blue is cold, red is hot. So you are up here. If we go back, these sort of big box store areas or industrial areas, very hot. And the ravine right here, nice and cool, blue. So we have some hot days ahead of us. Toronto is predicted to have an increased air temperature by 0.6 degrees in the next 11 years. Doesn't sound like a lot, but this will result in an extra week of 30-plus degree days. The heat wave in 2018 killed over 70 people in Montreal, so this is a serious issue. Heat waves particularly hit the poor who can't afford ACs, often have less street trees. It also affects the old. Heat stresses, kills, displaces wild animals as well as pets, because they have to deal with the same things as humans do. And heat also helps spread ticks with Lyme disease, invasive carps in warm streams, and mosquitoes with the West Nile virus. So I'm looking at solar radiation. So when we think about climate change, we think about the 2-degree goal. We usually talk about air temperature, the temperature we feel against us. But the air is heated from the ground. So when sunlight hits asphalt, concrete, soil, whatever, then the energy is then re-emitted or reflected back up, heating the air. But when that sunlight hits plants, at least some part of that energy is used by the plant to photosynthesize, to pull up water, to transpirate. And the more plants we have, the less energy is then re-emitted as heat back during the day. And we're also saying that we think there's evidence that the more diverse the vegetation is, the less heat is re-emitted back and the more is used. So what I'm talking about is increasing biomass and diversity, decreasing the net radiation or net flux, flux is a different name for radiation, of energy going out as heat, and that will chill the nature, which gets me to what I actually wanted to call this talk, Netflux and Chill. Thank you. I was quite proud of that one. So to measure, to do these kind of heat maps you saw before, I have two tools. I use satellites and the International Space Station and drones. Both of these have thermal cameras on them. Some are more expensive than others. And they're good for different tasks. So satellites and International Space Station, thermal cameras there. The imagery is free and publicly available. It's available to anyone in here. It has hundreds of kilometers of extent, each image. And there's global data going back to 1984. On the other hand, a drone, you have a resolution of centimeters, small pixels, compared to satellites that have at least 30 by 30 meter pixels. You decide when to fly it. I don't get to steer the satellites. And there's less error due to water vapor and other things in the atmosphere. And you can fly under clouds. So I think there are three important places where managers can use thermal imaging in their work. In planning, to identify heat islands, hot watersheds. And when we restore, we increase the biomass and plant diversity. And we can use the decreased temperatures or lack of decreased temperatures to monitor. Managers can monitor how well your restoration is doing by the temperature decrease. And if you're someone who's a grant writer trying to get funds, you can say to the people who are giving you money, hey, our restoration, it is decreasing temperatures. Look at this map. My main site is, or one of my two main sites is Norfolk County near Long Point, Lake Erie. So about 2.5 hours from here. This is a restoration of tallgrass prairie, oak woodland, oak savanna. And here is my friend Heather in this tallgrass prairie, and you can just start seeing some of the trees starting to make their way up there. This is about 4 or 5 years old. So on your right, yes, right, you're going to see a GIF of the temperature from 2007 to 2017. And I want you to keep attention on these green areas that are the restoration areas. So yellow and red is hot, purple, dark blue is cold. So in the beginning, it sort of shifts, goes back and forth in the beginning of restoration. But as it gets older, and there's some clouds. But as it gets older, you're going to see that the temperature difference between the mature forest and the restoration areas are just decreasing quite radically. So that's between 2007 and 2017. And we have 31 fields that we're looking at. So each of these lines is one field. This is before restoration. This is after restoration. So if all you want to look at is this big black line, that's the mean. Before restoration, no change. After restoration, 30 out of 31 fields are decreasing in temperatures. And on average, getting 1.5% colder per year. And on a sunny summer day, that is about 4.5 degrees colder over just 12 years. So as I showed you the EcoStress camera before, that's really exciting because it's the first thermal camera that we can also capture nighttime imagery. So it comes around sometimes during the night, depending on where the International Space Station is. Again, I don't get to steer that. But a cool thing with that is we can see that more mature forests, not only are they colder during the day, but they're also warmer during the night. So there's less difference. So looking at, for example, here is Bacchus Woods Conservation Area. That's a large conservation area. This is during the day. It's showing up as much colder than the red sort of agricultural fields and villages and towns. And then during the night, this is actually one of the warmer areas. So the vegetation takes in the energy during the day and then releases some of it as heat during the night. So it sort of slows down. Sort of like we were talking about flooding and floodwater, you need to slow it down. Here you're kind of slowing down the heat. So thanks to the staff of Nature Conservancy of Canada who've gone every year and done vegetation surveys on these plots. They did 168 2x2 meter plots they've surveyed each year. I can actually compare the thermal data to vegetation data. And what we find is when controlling for biomass, total plant cover, and canopy cover, that each added species decreases temperature by about 0.5 degree Celsius. And when we pull them apart, when we look at native species, native to Ontario, and exotic species, so native species to the right, and exotic to the left here, we find that it's only the native species that actually decreases temperatures. It might, so native species are having much stronger effect. So why is that? Why would more and more native species matter to temperature? So my theory, or it's not only mine, but a theory, is that if you have two ecosystems, ecosystem A and ecosystem B, and they both have the same amount of biomass, but one has sort of a quick-growing, jack-of-all-trades, exotic species like coltsfoot, Tussilago farfara, while the ecosystem B has more diversity. They might have a little blue stem, for example, that is a prairie grass that sets really deep roots, gets to the water in a sandy soil. You have something that is, you have a plant that's adapted to close and open and keep cool, has the right leaf shape. Oh, that came out in the bottom. That was an oak tree. And then you have maybe an oak that has mycorrhizal bonds that it is adapted to, so it can uptake nitrogen better, so it can create more chlorophyll, so it can grow, so it can create more leaf space, so it can take more energy. So the other project I'm working on, it's up near Collingwood on the Niagara Escarpment. And some of the speakers here were talking about the importance of soil. So we wanted to look at that. And basically what we did was take a bunch of diggers and trucks and dig up about 1,000 tons of soil and move it to a restoration area from a forest that's unfortunately going to be cut. We can't really do anything about that. But they let us take the soil, so we're taking that to a restoration area and creating plots to test the restoration. And my part of that is both doing the vegetation survey and then taking thermal data with the UAV. So this is a thermal image and a regular image with the UAV. So this is a large project. It's going over 4 years, 4 sites, 4 different types of restoration methods. Over 30 plus plots. Me and my very great assistants have done over 300 plant surveys, done over 8 days of flying, 8 flights per day, and I have about 2,000 thermal images that I'm going to be having a great fun with this fall. And analysis is ongoing, but this will test that, does it actually, temperature and diversity actually align when you control for biomass? So we'll see. So since I was invited here and my work isn't in Toronto, I wanted to do a little mini study. So this is the Rouge Valley. I haven't been there much. I've been more to the west of the city. But I figured I'd look at some temperature changes. I don't know much about the valley at all. There's probably people in this room that know 100 times more than me. But I looked at temperatures. So this is a comparison of 1985 to 2019. Redder is hotter, bluer is colder. The areas in sort of pink-purple here, that are areas that the Toronto Region Conservation Authority think are interesting, or they're managing or co-managing. So I looked at this and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. There's some spots that are heating up. There's some spots that have cooled down. Why is that? So I went back and I looked at, historical imagery. And what we find is that, this big plot here, that used to be a landfill and has been restored as part of the Rouge Valley National Park to a natural area, and that's cooled it down. While the red areas they're new developments, residential developments, mixed industrial. Toronto Zoo doing pretty well. And as well in here, there's some very dark blue plots. They were also restoration areas. Maybe someone in here knows who's doing them. I don't know, but just found them. So overall, the Lower Rouge watershed has increased by 1.5 degrees. This is assuming a sunny summer day. The all-TRCA co-managed areas decreased by 1 degree, not bad. And these three small areas that I pointed to, even though restoration, you can see down here, it was a agricultural field and it was turned into sort of a mix of forest and other stuff. But even though it's not like a full forest, it's still decreased by almost 6 degrees. And for the Rouge Park, the landfill, former landfill, that's also decreased by over 6 degrees. So one of the things I'm working on, and if someone gives me funding, we'll hopefully make real, is something we call TRUM. I'm working with some very good programmers at Waterloo. It's an automatic thermal monitoring system. So we want to create an online map tool that managers can sort of set an area, set it and forget it, and then you look at your restoration conservation areas, you map that out, you map out a mature area next to it, and then if something happens, you get an email alert saying, hey, in this field, these pixels, they are getting hotter. We don't know why, that's up to you. But they're getting hotter compared to neighboring pixels or compared to earlier times, as well as giving you an updated yearly report saying these fields have decreased by this much. And I think this can be used to guide ground level assessment. That's me and Heather again. So that countermeasures can be taken. So you see the pixel. Someone tells you, okay, you need to go out, look at exactly this point, find out why something's going wrong there. You go out, you do a regular survey, and then you can, do whatever needs to be, remove whatever weeds, or try to stop whatever encroachment of a fence or a lawn or whatever you need to do. So how can thinking in thermal help you? If you're a planner in here, you can locate what I call heat deserts. Thank to my partner for that idea, that name. And as well as hot watersheds for restoration planning. You can, as a manager, monitor restoration success and biodiversity based on temperature. As a grant writer, you can show funders what is your restoration doing, how much is it decreasing temperatures, how much could it decrease if you get more money to expand it. And for everyone, you can think about, are you in a heat desert? How far does someone old and poor, how far do they have to walk to a cool green space on a 30-degree day? As well, you can advocate for and plant more native and diverse greenery, including trees, and protect parks and street trees as cool islands, cool escapes. So, biodiversity, restoration matters to temperature, vice versa, temperature matters for native animals and plant habitat. Thermal satellites and UAVs can locate issues, monitor and evaluate restoration. and restoring urban cool islands and providing access for all to cool ravines is a health and it's an equality and equity issue. And with that, I want to say thank you.
That's great. Don't go away.
Yeah, no.
So that was fascinating, I have to say. I'm incredibly fascinated by this topic. Anybody have a question for Jonas?
Yeah, really enjoyed your talk. Thank you.
There's a fast microphone coming up behind you. Quick. Technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your talk.
Yeah.
My question is, when you're looking at diversity and how that affects the ability to cool an area,
Yeah.
does the diversity of the form of the plant seem to matter, like grasses versus shrubs and trees, or just whether it's native or not?
So I split it into native and exotic, but I think the reality is it has to do with the function of the plant as well as how well it's adapted. So I don't think, just because it's native, it's going to get colder. But, is it better adapted to the site conditions? Like in Norfolk County, it's very sandy soil. Water goes through it very quick, so you have to have deep roots, stuff like that. So, but I mean, this is something that I'm super interested in and might be a postdoc. Yeah.
Another one?
Thank you. Your talk was really interesting. How helpful are things like living walls and green roofs for cooling down cities?
That's a very good question, and I have tried. I'm trying to get. My university has some green roofs, and I really want to fly the UAV over them and take images and see the effect of those green roofs. Because the satellites are quite. The pixels are quite large. It's hard to just get like one roof unless they're very big. So again, that's something. If it's not my postdoc, it could be someone's master's project or someone's PhD. We have the UAV, we have the camera. I'm unfortunately at the end of my PhD, but if you're thinking grad school or an interesting project, it would be one for sure.
One more? Can we have one more question?
Hi, Jane Winninger. I couldn't help but notice the sort of intersection of solution for two of our global crises at the moment.
Yep.
Climate change and loss of biodiversity. You're seeming to connect the two very clearly. I wonder if you could just comment on that.
I mean, yes, for sure. I had a diagram I didn't show, but it's just two arrows going in. Biodiversity, temperature. It's just what do you call it? A virtuous cycle, basically. It is probably more complex. As scientists always say, more studies are needed. But I do think that this is a way to tie them together. That we can restore not just for biodiversity, but for sort of local temperature control. And yeah, I fully agree.
Okay.
All right,
Wonderful.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. That's great. Thank you, Jonas.